Good morning. Today is the 6th day of Av, the 24th of July. We are up to the second reading of VaEtchanan. And the reason that this reading is important because it's so pertinent to our time of the year. There's actually one of the most important verses, actually what we read on the morning of Tisha B'Av is in this reading. But before we get there, I want to dispel something about the Ten Commandments. First of all, you might know that nowhere in the Torah does it mention anything called the Ten Commandments. If I would have to translate that into Hebrew, it would be something like Aseret HaTzivuim, Aseret HaMitzvot, something like that. There is no such thing in the Torah. The Torah doesn't mention anything like that. What does the Torah mention? It mentions in our reading, we're talking about Deuteronomy 4:13. He told you the terms of his covenant that he commanded you to observe in the 10 sayings, and he inscribed them on 2 stone tablets. So they're called the 10 saying, not the 10 commandments. Now this is, you might think this is like nitpicking. Who cares? What is it, 10 commandments and 10 sayings? What's the difference? Well, first of all, everything in Torah is very exact. So there's a huge difference between saying commandments and saying 10 sayings. I'm going to show you in a moment what it means, 10 sayings. Like where are there 10 sayings there? But the thing that we need to know is that when the codifiers of the mitzvos, of the commandments in the entire Torah, the 613 commandments, or that's also a certain tradition that we have that we're supposed to identify 613. It's not so simple to identify 613. There's a lot of controversy and dispute about which exactly are included and which aren't. But in any case, the codifiers, such as Maimonides and a codifier who was before him, called Baal Halachot Gdolot, the master of the great work of halacha, they count either 13 or 14 commandments in the verses of the 10 commandments, the verses that are called the 10 commandments. So to say 10 commandments is simply is not at all correct, because there are at least 13 or 14 commandments there. Now, if you look at how many verses there are, so this is one of the parts we're talking about this. Let me also say one more word of introduction. We're talking about this because in our Torah reading this week, VaEtchanan, there's the second account of the 10 commandments. And as I said, it's a little bit different. It has 88 extra letters. So if there were 620 exactly in the first account, which was in Exodus, in Yitro, in Jethro, so here in VaEtchanan we have 708 letters. So it's a little bit different. But, so that's the general reason why we're talking about this. But again, this phrase, the 10 sayings, appears in our reading. So what is that exactly referring to? So it's not referring to how many commandments there are. And it's also would be a different word. Maybe it's referring to the number of verses. But when you count the number of verses, so this is one of the sections in the Torah. There's only 2 such sections, both times that we have the 10 commandments, that there are 2 variant divisions of the words into verses. One variant divides them into 9, and one variant divides them into 13. The difference between them is like this: that when we read the Torah personally, like in a Chumash, you'd open up a Bible and read yourself, then you read it according to the division into 13. But if you read it in public, then it's divided into 9. And this is called the higher and lower divisions of these verses. Now, you remember that we've been talking a lot over the last few months about 9 and 13, right? There are 9 principles of God's mercy and 13 principles of God's mercy, altogether 22. So they correspond to the 22 the 22 letters of the Hebrew alphabet, but also what we call the 22, let's call them the 22 powers or faculties of the soul. They're altogether 22, and this is something we haven't looked at yet, but it's something that needs to be discussed. It appears in different places. So we have 9 and 13 verses. So what is there 10 of? So what I'm going to do is I'm going to share the screen with you so you can see this. I hope it's not too tiny. It's also probably going to be in the wrong direction, but we'll try anyway. So this is what I've done here is I've arranged the 10 commandments. It's probably too tiny to see, but I hope you see the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 on the left and on the right. I hope you can see those at least. And what we have here is a division according to what we call the paragraphs of the Torah. Now the paragraphs of the Torah, they either end with a samech like here or a pei like here, which means either it's an open paragraph or a closed paragraph. It means in the Torah scroll that either the paragraph ends and it's open all the way to the end, or the paragraph ends, there's a small gap, and then the next paragraph starts on the same line. So what there are 10 of is 10 paragraphs. Now, interestingly, in the first paragraph, we have the first 2 commandments. I am Hashem your God, and you shall not bow down to, you shall not make for yourself a sculptured image, and so on, which is what people call the second commandment. Why do they call it the second commandment? Not clear, because really these two, they appear in the same saying, the first and second. The second paragraph, which is what you would call the commandment, but it's not a commandment, is you shall not swear falsely by the name of your God. The third saying is the Sabbath. The fourth is honoring your father and your mother. You shall not murder is the fifth. You shall not commit adultery is the sixth. You shall not steal is the seventh. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor is the 8th paragraph. The 9th is you shall not covet your neighbor's house. Now, in terms of the way that people divide this, the 9th and the 10th are actually considered to be one. So it's a very interesting thing that what happens is that people tend to divide the first 2 into 2 commandments, even though, again, in terms of commandments, there's 14 here, so that it's not even the right division. But the way that this is divided normally is that the first paragraph is divided into 2, and the last 2 paragraphs are joined into 1, and that's how you get 10. But what is this saying? What does it mean that the 10 commandments were not 10 commandments, but 10 sayings? What that is saying to us is that this is a document that records how God spoke to the people. Meaning, and this is very important to know, that we always say that the first 2 commandments, Anochi and Lo Yeh, meaning I am your God and you shall not have any gods besides me, those are the first 2 in terms of mitzvot, in terms of commandments. Now we're talking about mitzvot. They were said in one saying, meaning God spoke this to everyone. And then the next 9 sayings, which contain another 12 commandments, were spoken by God to Moses, and Moses then relayed them. But that's why the first 2 are so special, because they were in one saying, they were heard by everyone at the same time. So it's very important to understand that these are not, this is one of the mistakes that happens when you follow the, call it the Western version of Judaism, is that very basic things are completely confused. And really what this is talking about is not 10 commandments, but 10 sayings. Why is that so important, sayings? Because I don't know if we've talked about this before, I always hate repeating myself, but then I realize that even if I do repeat myself, I probably don't remember, so certainly nobody else remembers. there's this simple idea that when God created the world, He created it with 10 sayings. Vayomer Elokim, God said, let there be light. What did He say? He said, let there be light. Then He said, let there be a firmament. Let there be, let the earth show through the waters, and so on. So 10 times it says that He said something. That was a setup of nature. And nature, like we know, conceals God. These sayings were meant to rectify the situation where nature was the only thing that was possible, and the only connection that humanity could have with God was the animistic connection, the animistic religions that felt, and maybe rightly so, but it led to a plurality of aspects of God. They felt that God was in every aspect of nature, within every part of nature. The 10 sayings, or / commandments, as they're known in the West, they were meant to remedy that situation and to reveal God Himself to the world in such a way that it would no longer be the plurality that comes out from nature and the concealment that nature conceals godliness. And so it's very important that these are called the 10 sayings. They came to supplant, to take the place of, in a certain sense, the 10 sayings of creation. And that shift, revealing God through the mind and not through nature, through the word, the spoken word, specifically the spoken word, because the spoken word that created the world is not something that we are in touch with on a day-to-day basis, but the spoken word that created this supplanting of nature and revealing godliness, that we are in touch with every single day through the Torah. That's what the Torah comes to remedy. There was just one sculpted image, the likeness of anything, and do evil in the eyes of God, your God, to provoke Him to anger. I invoke heaven and earth today as witnesses that you will speedily and utterly perish from the land into which you are crossing. You will not prolong your days upon it, but you will be utterly destroyed. And so the idea is that God saved us from that by destroying the temple 2 years earlier. This was in the Second Temple period, 2 years earlier than 852. Again, this is just a hint, but it's a very deep idea that you don't always want to use all your time. It may be that in this case, using all the time, using all 852 years, the decision remained anything for us to talk today about Torah. So thank you for joining, and I guess we'll stick here because I guess it's not going to work otherwise. So sorry for that attempt. Maybe we'll try some other time and see if that works.